All right, what's up, Josh?
Not much, Jason. How's it going, brother?
Not too bad. So, what is Midwest Mind Melt about?
Midwest Mind Melt?
Yeah, what are we about?
What are we about? This is the question that everybody wants to ask themselves. They want to ask themselves, what are we about? No, just kidding. Midwest Mind Melt's our podcast. And I think before we even answer that, we should talk about what a podcast is. Like, when's the first time you even heard of a podcast?
So I actually heard about podcasts a long time ago, but it wasn't really a thing. Like I knew about it, but I didn't actually listen to a podcast. And then obviously Ian was like, "Dude, you gotta listen to Joe Rogan." And so I started listening to Joe Rogan, and it turned me on to some other podcasts that I started listening to. And I mean, I guess the real thing would be that it's kind of grown in the last probably give it 5 years.
They have grown a lot this
7 to 5
decade.
years, yeah. So, but I mean, they've always kind of been around. I mean, if you think about talk radio was essentially a podcast.
Talk radio has been around since the 1930s, is what I've read. I mean, it's been around for a long time. And then there was internet radio for a while. I think through the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
which in the 90s we didn't even have a computer in my house.
No.
But we're going to actually look up what internet radio is, because I don't really know what it is off the top of my head. If you said internet radio to me today, I'd probably tell you you're talking about a podcast.
Yeah.
But no, podcasts actually, based on what I've read, they actually started back in the early 2000s. So you're talking 2003, 2004 was the very early days of podcasts.
Yeah.
And so if you started a podcast anywhere from 2005 to 2010, you're technically a pioneer.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, anyway.
As I'm saying, I had heard the term podcast years ago.
Interesting fact: do you actually know where that term comes from?
I actually don't.
The best place that I heard that it comes from is actually iPod and broadcast. You combine those two words, you get podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot of sense.
It really does, and I think that's where I first heard it, was when iTunes was when Apple really, when they first released iTunes and iTunes was becoming the biggest music provider on the internet. I remember always seeing a podcast tab, and there was a podcast that I'd listened to way back when, and I was really confused because I didn't know what it was, and I forgot what it was. It was some kind of kid podcast. I think it was something related to Pokemon or something like that. I don't even remember, but that's what really. That's when I first heard of it, but I really didn't do anything with it after that. I was like, okay, this is just kind of like people talking.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's just people talking.
But it's kind of interesting that you bring up podcasting and internet radio and talk radio, and you told me to listen to the podcast with Joe Rogan and Jocko Willink.
Jocko Willink, yeah, that's how I say his name.
Yeah, Willink. And it was really interesting because he mentions in there, when you watch TV, you can you visually see it and your mind can distort it, and same when you read something. But when you hear it, it's raw, it's uncut, it's literally there. And so when you talk about talk radio, internet radio, that was why propaganda was so big on the radio, because you couldn't really associate a picture with it. You had to listen to it, and you had to come up with that
image in your head.
Yeah, that image in your head about it. And so that's why Ian likes to watch Joe Rogan. I like to kind of just listen to him sometimes, and just kind of get a feel for what he's talking about, instead of having that. But not that watching him isn't great, because I mean, he's a good dude, but I mean, yeah. So I think that probably podcast stems from what talk radio used to be.
No, it really does, and that's been talked about many times in different podcasts. Is why are podcasts so popular? Why is talk radio somewhat dying down? I mean, talk radio is still around. I think it's going to be around for a while.
Oh yeah, it'll still be there.
But the thing, and this came from Joe Rogan himself. And to all of you listening, you're going to hear us mention Joe Rogan's name a lot, because he was probably one of our biggest inspirations for starting this podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
But he talked about talk radio. Talk radio was great. You got a lot of good points. A lot of revolutionary points came from listening to talk radio.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with talk radio was it was all on the talk radio it was all on that time.
Mhm.
You had to tune in at a certain time. You have to listen to the advertisements, on their time. And if you missed it, you missed it.
Yeah.
What's great about podcasts is they're pretty much yours to do with as you want.
Yeah.
You download them and you can play them, you can pause them, you can rewind them, you can fast forward. Podcasts are just so much more convenient. And the advertisements, you don't have to listen to the advertisements.
No, not at all.
The advertisements really aren't even that bad. They're either before the podcast,
or
sometimes
after.
Yeah, sometimes they're during, but or after. I mean, you really don't have to listen to them.
So I listened to one called Directionally Challenged with Candace King and some friend that she has from I forget where, but she starred in Vampire Diaries, and they started their own podcast. And they do their own advertisements, but it's like they'll take a break in the middle of the show to do an advertisement, but it's like a 10-minute bit about whatever their, whoever their sponsors are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you're right. I think convenience with podcasting is probably the biggest reason why it's so popular. I know for me, sometimes it takes me 1 to 2 days to finish like an episode of Joe Rogan, because I don't listen to a podcast straight through. I'll listen to it while I'm driving, or while I'm like cleaning house, or while I'm in here messing with our stuff. Playing around with stuff. And so, yeah, I would definitely say that's probably one reason why so many people have gotten into, like, listening to podcasts. But I think a lot of it, too, is just hearing a different point of view, hearing somebody else's perspective on something, a situation, or an event, which I really want to talk about this, but we'll talk about it in another episode, was that shooting that occurred last night.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in another episode. We talk about it later this episode. I don't care.
But that's one of those things is it also gives us the opportunity to share our perspectives and our opinions on what's going on in the world.
No, that's exactly why podcasting has become such a saturated market, because it is a little platform for yourself where you can put out your perspective. We did a whole episode about mass media and the poison that it pumps into society.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to get perspective from just normal law-abiding citizens.
Absolutely. And that's a huge, like I said, I don't really listen to I don't watch the news. I catch what I do when I'm at the gym.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't follow CNN. I don't follow Fox. I follow local news just because it's local and I want to know what's going on in my own community. But I don't follow national news. It's too easy to get wrapped up in everything that they're saying, and you're being, like we discussed, you're being fed a table of lies, And it's interesting. I would love to talk to some of those people that have actually been at those events that have occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be a mass shooting, whether it be a protest, whether it be whatever whatever they're reporting on, and get like an actual story from somebody who experienced that, not just what the media wants you to know.
Oh, you're going to get a totally different perspective.
And I feel like podcasts, when we get those people on to talk about their experiences in those situations, that's when you're going to get the real story. That's when you're really going to find out what happened. And that's what podcasting offers to the world.
Yes. For example, when Joe Rogan's had several presidential candidates on his show,
mm-hmm.
This is great, and people tune into these episodes, especially the one with Bernie Sanders, because This is a chance for a guy to ask questions and there be no red tape.
Exactly.
There's no red tape from a big corporate mass media company, because Joe Rogan, it's just Joe Rogan and one friend that pretty much run this podcast. And so
exactly.
He can ask him whatever he wants. He can be like, Bernie, have you ever molested children? Because, you couldn't do that in a professional studio.
No, you absolutely could not.
They would cut you off real quick.
Yeah, exactly.
But Joe Rogan, of course, he didn't ask that question.
Yeah.
Nor do I want him to. Although it'd be kind of funny if he did ask something like that. But it's just the fact that he asked some pretty straight up questions that I probably would have asked myself.
Yeah.
That I don't hear them asking on like Fox and Friends and fucking Don Lemon and CNN. You're not going to hear.
What's that one really good show, The View? Is that what it's called?
that really good show. Really good in quotations.
Yeah, good show.
Yeah.
But yeah, podcasting to me has changed my entire life, man. Like just what little bit we've done and where when we talk about where we're gonna go, for us at least, it gives me a sense of like security and a sense of hope. And like we've said, this is something we look forward to every week when we sit down to record. It's our or hour and a half, whatever it is, to kind of just let loose and be the guys and talk about what we want to talk about. And it's I don't know, man. It's been great.
No, it's definitely a good reason to get together with one of your buddies and talk, like you would if you were sitting at the bar with a beer, except this time it's recorded and we got an audience. That's awesome.
And also we're doing Sober October this year, so
yeah, this month we can't.
Yeah,
so there's gonna be no beers.
Yeah, but
unfortunately
we might do one like for November. The first week of November, obviously, is gonna be a little bit different. But anyways,
no, yeah, it's almost like a religious experience, just a little bit.
Almost, yeah. I mean,
because it's very enlightening. When I listen to other podcasts, I always pick up some knowledge. It's awesome.
Yep, and I would be lying if I told you, because I've listened to Directionally Challenged. I've listened to Joe Rogan. I listened to Your Mom's House. Louder with Crowder. I take something away from every episode that I listen to, and it's interesting because when you like I said, like Jocko said, when you listen to it, you hear it more, because when you're seeing it, you can be distorted by the picture or whatever the case is, but when you listen to it, your mind absorbs it differently.
Right.
And so if you listen to a podcast and you don't take anything away from that, you probably need to get your hearing checked, because you should at least take something away from everything that you hear.
You're probably pretty stupid. And I will say podcasts usually aren't for very unintelligent people that just want to party, just want to fuck bitches. Podcasts usually aren't for you. You have to have some type of thirst for a deeper knowledge. You have to have some type of want to see a different perspective or point of view, because if you're just about the carnal lifestyle and drinking and doing coke is your thing, podcasts really aren't for you.
No, not at all. And actually, some of the books that I've bought and read, I've heard about on Joe Rogan's podcast, or on Your Mom's House, and it's kind of crazy because I would never think that something that I listened to would inspire me to go out and buy a book, or a book that I haven't read yet, but I bought. It took me a while to find it because you can't just buy it in a bookstore. It's called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And Joe Rogan had David Goggins on his podcast to talk about his book after it got published. And it was really interesting because he talks about how long it took him to get his book published because of the content that's in his book. It's not like bad content, it's his story, it's his life. But if you've ever heard David Goggins speak, he's very just blunt, to the point. He's a lot like Jocko. Mm-hmm. He was a Navy SEAL Ranger. And he went through some terrible stuff, and his book is all about his story and how he overcame those shortfalls in his life, and how he's become successful because of it. And so that was one of those situations where I was like, man, I gotta read this book, I actually have the audiobook as well. But that's the thing about podcasts, is like just listening to David Goggins speak. And if you follow him on Instagram, which if you have an Instagram, I suggest you follow him, because it's not every day, but he'll post like a 1 minute motivational video where he's out running, and he talks and he's very motivational. He's all about working hard and fucking earning what you get.
Yep. And I noticed that Rogan, he has a lot of motivational type people on his podcast, mm-hmm. because that's one of his goals. One of his goals is to motivate people.
Well, that's why he teaches Taekwondo.
Something
jiu-jitsu.
like that.
It's jiu-jitsu.
He teaches, he's definitely big into martial arts and MMA. But, and honestly, for Midwest Mind Melt, that's kind of a direction that I want to go into.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to talk a lot about lighthearted subjects, like this episode, for example, and, some political stuff we want to talk about that's not so lighthearted. But also, we want to interview, people like Devin, people like Ridge, guys who are really into what they do, because it's motivational.
Yep. Seeing these people that have worked hard to get where they're at, and we want to, even if you guys, our audience, if you're sitting on the fence about starting something, if you're sitting on the fence about starting something, and you're not 100% sure that you can do it, we want to help be that motivation that's going to push you over the edge, that's going to let you go full force, because these are people that they're not celebrities, they're people that started at the very bottom, worked tooth and nail to get where they're at. And we want to inspire people to do the same thing.
Devin, when he was here after we were done recording, he said something that still sticks with me to this day that I didn't even really think about. But like the type of job that we work here, and a lot of people in Fremont and across the country work jobs like we do, we work in a plant. I mean, it's a pretty much a plant. It's industrial. It's
It's
one of those,
production.
yes, it's one of those places where, honestly, it pays pretty decent, especially for the area. But it's one of those jobs where you can really just get stuck at, and you can do it for the rest of your life or until you retire, until you can't do it anymore.
mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of living that type of life. It's not the worst life you can live, but it's kind of just a dead end.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and so there's not a lot of hope in places like that. So doing this podcast, not only do we want to spark hope in others, it's also been kind of like a way to spark hope in ourselves.
Yeah, definitely to get us to kind of like sit down and actually think about other things we can do to help push ourselves further.
All right.
Both in our jobs and our daily lives, even relationships for that matter.
All right.
It's been like, and I'm hoping that when all is said and done, we're only 8 episodes online right now.
9
episodes online right now, and we're gonna far surpass that. I mean, we'll far surpass anything that we ever thought. And Devin, unfortunately, our podcast with Devin didn't go the way we wanted it to, and so we're gonna bring it back on in about 6 months to talk some more, and hopefully it'll flow a little better. But something that I definitely want to put out to our followers right now. If you've listened to any of our past episodes, our audio is pretty inconsistent. We've bounced around with different mics, different equipment. We're trying to get a setup that's going to work and be pleasurable for you guys to listen to. But that's why we're struggling right now to get started. But eventually we're going to get there, and the outcome's going to be phenomenal. And your guys' support, for one, just right out the gate was just absolutely stellar. And we couldn't be more thrilled to have such a great following right at the start. But we want to surpass that. We definitely want to go above and beyond and really capitalize. And when I say capitalize, I'm not talking be rich and make money. I had a buddy, and this is kind of my personal perspective here. I had a buddy that passed away, God, man, probably had to be close to 10 years ago. Maybe a little longer, 11 years ago. And we were in Scouts together. And he was a very, very big influence on me. So he actually died in a drunk driving accident. He wasn't driving. Unfortunately, the driver survived. He ended up losing his life. But when I went to his memorial, there was 300 people at his memorial. I constantly talk about my legacy. What is my legacy going to be?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to be rich. I don't have to be famous to be happy. I just want to know that I've influenced somebody to be better, do better, and work harder, and be the best that they can be. I don't have to have all this fame and fortune and be like, oh, I know that guy. Yeah, he's cool. It's not what it's about.
Not about the zeros in your bank account.
Nope.
That was another thing Devin said that was true.
You could have all the money in the world and still be unhappy.
Yeah.
And Joe Rogan talked about that in that episode with Jocko about why, how people who struggle tend to be more successful.
Yep.
Because they know how to struggle. They've been through the struggle. People who are handed everything in life don't know what it's like to struggle. So when that struggle comes up, they don't know what to do.
No, they don't.
And I've had several people in my life that I've mentored and taught and led, and honestly, I'm a very selfless person. I'll bend over backwards, fight tooth and nail to help you out, because that's the kind of person I am. And that's where a lot of selflessness comes in. And we talked about leadership.
Yeah.
And to be a good leader, you have to be selfless. You're the last person you think of.
Yep.
And that's where I just want to be able to influence people that like my friend did. He was a huge influence in my life growing up through Scouts. He really influenced me a lot. He's the one that influenced me to play football. He was the one that influenced me to really go out and push myself to be better. And I want to have that influence on somebody else, or even multiple people for that matter.
All right.
And that's a little bit about me, if we're gonna get down in the weeds a little bit. But that's one reason why I wanted to do a podcast. And I had talked about doing a podcast for a year. And it was something I had kind of kept to myself. I talked to my fiance about it, Dave. I talked to Dave about it a little bit. And when me and Josh kind of started talking about it, I was like, you know what? I got somebody else that wants to go in on this with me. You know what? Now's the time to go. and Devin's a very big person. We'll do a video podcast with him, so you guys can kind of get a feel of the kind of person he is. But he's one of those people. He's like, you need to do it now. Don't wait till tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where we started. Was we just kind of jumped into it. But I guess it all started like what really initiated it for me and Josh was we only work 4 days a week where we work. So Thursday nights we get off work, and we were usually in the parking lot 2-3 hours.
Yeah, usually.
And we were just talking. I mean, we were usually drinking, but
yeah,
we were just talking. And we talk about any and everything. And we sat and we were talking about it one day, and we're like, you know what? Why don't we start a podcast where we do the same thing? Where, we talk about something we saw on Facebook or whatever.
Well, there was originally about 5 of us that were wanting to go on a podcast.
Yeah, actually, there was about 5 of us.
But, talk is cheap, and when, you have people talking, and then when you actually, get into the grind and doing something, you find out who's actually serious and who's not.
Exactly, and that's one of those things is, the idea of it sounded good to these people, but I think going through the motions of actually getting it accomplished was what the downfall was. But
the commitment part of it, I think, really threw them off.
And that's when me and Josh sat down and we talked about doing our own. It was all about that commitment, diving in head first. I did 2 weeks of research before we even sat down to even talk about our first episode. And if you've listened to our first episode was a little rough. Like, hands down, was a little rough.
Our first few episodes kind of were a little rough, honestly.
But we've generally gotten more comfortable being behind a microphone. This is kind of a new thing for both of us.
Yeah.
But we definitely feel like we've gotten more comfortable, and hopefully that'll only get better as we progress through this. And I just now we got the guys that were supposed to go in on this podcast with us listening to our podcast.
Yep.
And they love it. And it's been a really humbling experience, honestly.
No, absolutely.
But when did we start talking about this? Back in June?
I remember, starting to talk about it probably towards the end of May, beginning of June.
Yeah, is when we actually started talking about podcasting, and
it was the following month, July, we started recording.
Yeah, and I guess it was a month of research and learning about how to hook things up, how to run stuff, how to do this. It's just me and Josh. We get done recording, and I spend the next 2 hours in the studio editing, doing this kind of thing to get these episodes to you guys. And it's been a humbling experience. It's definitely been a grind, like you said. Definitely been a grind. But when you really love what you do, is it really work?
Right, it's not work. It's entertainment. I mean, it's still work, but it's like it's fulfilling.
Exactly.
Whenever you feel fulfilled from doing work, it's like it's not work. It's not a drag at all. And it's really interesting when you look up like things like how to make a successful podcast. I mean, there's these lists of things that there's a lot of websites, and they'll tell you step by step on how to do it. They'll tell you things like you want to keep it within 20 to 30 minutes. That's how long you want to keep your podcast. They'll also tell you want to come up with a specific subject to target a specific audience, and once you have that audience targeted, that's who you go for. I find it interesting because Joe Rogan didn't follow any of these things.
No, he didn't. And he's one of the most successful podcasters there is.
And I think that's why, I respect that, because he kind of have, like, especially with the length, he has episodes that can go up to close to 3 hours.
Yeah. I think his Sober October one from last year was upwards of almost 4.
Yeah, and he has some episodes that are as little as about just over an hour.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders was about an hour.
Yep, and so he kind of has like the line in Fight Club where Brad Pitt says, fights will go on as long as they have to. That's Joe Rogan. Episodes will go on as long as they have to.
Exactly. He's not afraid to sit down and talk.
But like when you look at like New York Times, they just came out with a podcast 2 years ago, and it's one of the most successful podcasts. It's called The Daily. They follow all of that crap. I mean, they have a very large audience, obviously. It's New York Times. They got the best journalists that you can ask for. And so they get a lot of material and news and people want to listen to it. And they follow all that. Most of their episodes are about 20 to 30 minutes long. They definitely target their specific audience, and they're really good at what they do. But I just find it amazing because if you look on just a simple website like Wikipedia about The Daily, there's a whole list of producers.
Yeah.
I mean, so that tells me that there are people in a big a big conference room, and they're talking about each episode, and
they're having like production meetings.
Yes, and they're really talking about, okay, what content can we say, what can we not say. What's awesome about Joe Rogan is he's on that level with them, and he doesn't have to do any of that.
So here's a question: is that more like talk radio than a podcast?
That is definitely talk radio in podcast form.
Exactly. It's not a podcast. And that was one of the things when we sat down, we told ourselves we're not going to script this out. And that's why when you listen to some of our episodes, we have a couple moments in there where we're kind of scrambling to find our next our next segue into our next, the next thing we're going to talk about. It's because we don't want it to be fake for you guys. We want you guys, and that's what Midwest Mind Melt for us is for sure. One of the biggest things that we thrive on for our podcast is we want it to be real. We don't want you guys to think we're trying to fill some agenda or that we're trying to get you to see our perspective of it. But going back to the whole like producers and in production meetings, when you start talking about production meetings and you start thinking about targeting a target audience, here's the issue with that. You don't give yourself the opportunity to grow.
No. But obviously the daily doesn't need to grow.
What I'm saying is if you listen to like in like Joe Rogan, I refer to him so much because he's the one podcast that I've listened to.
It's okay. I already did the disclaimer. They already know.
Yeah. But when you listen to Joe Rogan, it's not, there's no red tape.
Right.
At all.
Like I said.
And, when you start looking at like how like production meetings and things like this, he mentions how he may not agree with somebody when they're talking about a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
But he learns to see it from their perspective or see it from a different perspective.
Absolutely.
And like you said, when he first started doing his podcast, it was really hard for him, because he wanted to tell us to just shut up. That's not how it is.
Mm-hmm.
But as his podcast has grown, he's learned to kind of open his mind a little bit and see things from a different perspective. And that's something I hope that we can accomplish too. At least me personally, and I know you're probably the same way.
Yep.
Is that when we bring people on, our guests, we learn to see a situation from a whole nother side, whether it be the struggle, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be video gaming, whether it be board gaming.
Hopefully we're going to have a political one here soon.
Yeah, whether it be a politician.
No, I don't want a politician. If we can get one, that'd be awesome. But like just somebody from the East Coast who has a completely different mindset than two guys that are living in the Midwest right now.
Exactly, and a lot of people, and Josh mentioned this before. The Midwest is constantly people think we're like hardcore, like right over here.
Yeah, Midwest usually indicates, for some reason, hardcore conservative.
Yeah,
because Middle America usually is. That's another thing that we have to offer in Midwest Mind Melt is that both of us, we lean right, but we're not ultra right. And honestly, we're, for the most part, I'm pretty moderate, and you sound like you're pretty moderate too. We have tolerance to listen to other points of views.
Yep.
And, like when you talk about climate change and stuff, you'll see that we're not ultra conservative and we're not ultra right on that. We're actually pretty moderate on the issue of climate change.
And that's the thing about being diverse with your topics is we're not trying to target one audience. We're trying to target all audiences. And that's why we talk about different things and why we talk about the subjects we do at this point, because we're trying to achieve a following, because we're trying to see it from a different perspective.
Yep.
The left people support the left, for their own reasons. And it's interesting to find out what their reasons are.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the super right people that, that are like super crazy conservative, and you listen to some of their perspectives and you're like, okay, I understand why you see it that way. But it's all about growth.
Yep.
Growth is a choice.
Yep.
And there's so many hard-headed people out there that, nope, this is how it is, this is how we're going to do it.
Yep.
And you have to understand that you choose to grow, and if you don't, things aren't going to change. You're not going to learn to see things differently.
Yeah, and a lot of people have no interest in seeing things differently, and I can't blame them, because when you see things differently, it can be scary.
It really can.
It can be very scary, and so they don't want to deal with that. So I get it. I get why people are set in their ways. It's just, in my opinion, I don't think that's the best way to be all the time. On some things, it's great to be set in your ways. When it comes to the issue of child abuse, I think it's great to be set in your ways to not put up with that.
Exactly.
And so...
Or sex trafficking, for that matter.
There's definitely some issues that it's not healthy to be on the fence about. But, when it comes to a lot of this political stuff,
Yep.
I mean, most people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I don't want to give anybody the impression that me and Jason are experts, and I'm sure we haven't, but we're not. We really don't know what we're talking about 100%. We know all the information that's been given to us, and that's it.
Yeah, so when we get done tonight, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about what we're going to record next week. And so we get a week to do our research. And we both we both have very busy lives. But I mean, we do we do enough research to get through an hour. I mean, yeah, could we do more? Of course. But we don't want to come off as experts in the fields we're talking, because we're not.
No.
I'm not a scientist. I don't know about the flat earth. I don't know about,
The flat earth.
like orbital patterns. I don't know about that kind of stuff. Could I read enough to kind of know about it? Of course. But I'm not going to come out. I want to give you a little bit of information, tell you where to go to get it, and let you guys do your own research. Like one episode I know we're going to talk about, the Culper spies. Okay? Spy rings are real. Are they still? Probably. But were they real? Absolutely. And it's interesting, but we'll talk about that in another episode, because that was a subject that was brought onto me. I'm a history buff, for you guys that don't know me. I love history. I love American history. I don't care about China and all that crap over there, but I love American history. And to know that spies were around back during the Revolutionary War was a crazy, mind-blowing experience for me. And so I really want to talk about that. That's just something that I personally want to talk about. And I'll do the research. And it's one of those things, it's like you learn about things. It's forced me to learn. Definitely sitting here every week talking about a subject forces me to learn something new.
Yep.
And that's where that growth comes into play. But I honestly don't regret a single thing we've done with this thing.
No. And if you have anything interesting about your personality or anything interesting at all, I mean, a podcast is a good platform for you. It's very practical. Anybody can do it with the right equipment, and it's a great way to get your personality out there.
So we refer a lot to Joe Rogan. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of money.
We're Joe Bros.
I don't have a studio. We're literally sitting in a room that's probably 10 by 10. I don't have a fancy mixer. We have microphones, yes. We have a camera, we have lights, we have headphones, we have all that funny stuff. But all of my recording stuff is all digital, free downloadable software. And it's totally capable. Anybody can do it. And that's what I'm saying. When we first started talking about this, I had to do weeks of research to figure out how we were going to make this work without dropping $2 or $3 grand to set up an audio station in this room, trying to figure out the space, everything else. We literally I sat down, started watching YouTube videos, started Googling some stuff, and I found out about free software. It's done with donationware, so you can donate to the people that created it, but it's free to download, and it's completely you can do it so simple.
Yep.
All the information's out there. If you have if you have something you're really passionate about and you love talking about it, do a podcast. Sit down, record yourself a couple times, see how you feel about it, and talk and just talk about it.
Yeah.
It's not hard to get it out there. I think the distribution part of it was the hardest thing for me to learn, and it wasn't even that hard. I learned it in less than 3 days.
Yep.
So
definitely been made a lot easier. And like I said, it's really been this decade where they've just blown up.
Yeah,
podcasts have just blown up. I mean, like I said, 15 years ago, there was a lot less of them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just crazy to think about how many people are doing it now. And I think that there's a lot of podcasts out there that aren't actually podcasting anymore. They're still out there on the internet because obviously it's out there.
Yeah.
But consistency is key.
Consistency is key, and you need to make the commitment.
Yep.
So you need to, if you're going to do a podcast, and that's why doing it about one subject can get old pretty quick, because you have to be somewhat passionate about what you're doing with the podcast, and so it needs to be. And that's why I kind of like what we do with Midwest Mind Melt, is we're not nailed down to one subject. We can talk about abortion one week, and then we could talk to a law enforcement officer the next week.
Yep.
It's awesome because we can continually pump out content.
Yeah, and
so if you're going to start a podcast, you definitely have to make the commitment, and you need to put out content, at least one episode a week.
Yeah, and that's where we've been. Like we said, me and Josh were talking Friday when we came in to sit down and record. So there are weekends we will record 2 episodes every now and again, just to kind of give us that time to have some to upload. But like, for instance, the last 2 weeks we were not in the studio. I was in Miami 2 weeks ago. He got married last weekend.
Yep.
And was on his honeymoon, so we didn't have an opportunity to be in the studio to sit down and record. And we kind of, I don't know about you, man, I kind of started having withdrawals about it. I was like, man, I want to sit down, I want to start talking, I want to record.
I didn't even know what was going to happen. I thought maybe I'd get in front of the mic and just
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and so that's kind of the fun part, is you kind of get that opportunity to just kind of, like, once you start doing it, it's almost one of those things. It's like, it kind of gives you kind of a natural high, if you know.
Right.
At least for me, I sit down and I'm like, man, this is fun. I love doing it.
Well, and especially as guys, it's like, it's a stereotype that men just, that we don't communicate well. And that's complete bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
We communicate, just as good, if not better, than women. It's just we don't talk as much as them. But I think there's more we say less words with more meaning.
That's a good way to put it.
But podcasts have blown up big time for women. Women host a lot of podcasts, and pretty much everybody who's listening to them are women and very odd men. But guys like Joe Rogan, he has like plenty of people. He has such a wide variety of people on there. But he has, like, you get a guy like Jocko Willink. He's another one that we're going to mention a lot because that episode was great. If you haven't seen it,
episode 926,
something like that. Yeah, 926, I believe. Look it up. But that's a guy who says very few words, but there's so much meaning in what he says.
Yep, exactly. And
it's all about content, really. You can have the best equipment for podcasting, you can have the best software, everything, but if you don't have good content, your podcast is going nowhere.
If you don't have good content or a connection with your audience, you won't go anywhere.
Yep.
And so when we first started, obviously a lot of people like to do video podcasts. We weren't set up to do that. We are now, obviously, but and this is going to give you guys kind of an opportunity to see like our personalities come out a little more, because there's a lot of things that happen like behind the screen that you guys don't see when you just hear us recording. So
you can see how fidgety I am.
I talk with my hands a lot. Obviously, I'm trying not to block my face, but it is what it is. But that's one of those things is we come up with a lot of excuses as to why we can't do something, and at the end of the day, that's all it is just an excuse. I mean, I could have come up with a million excuses why I can't sit down for 1 hour a week, sometimes 2, and have a conversation with Josh about whatever it is that we want to talk about. Do you guys talk? You talk with your friends anyways. I mean,
why not?
Yeah, why not sit down and maybe think about doing a podcast? Yeah, it's work.
Mm-hmm.
But you might find out that you actually might have a passion for it. You might actually really enjoy it. I like to talk, and sometimes I talk too much. A lot of the time I talk too much.
Yes, you do.
but unfortunately, that's just who I am. I've always been that kind of guy. And it's what made me really great when I worked customer service. I was able to connect with customers.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to connect with my employees. It was one of those things I used to be really shy, actually, growing up. I didn't like talking to people. I didn't like meeting new people. But I'm the kind of person, I can go to a bar and just start a conversation with anybody because it doesn't matter, because I've grown out of that shell. And this gives me that opportunity to share that with more people. I'm really excited. Hopefully we're going to get to a point where we have people contacting us to try and get on our podcast and talk to us about whatever it is they do. If you're passionate about something, come talk to us about it.
And for now, we're going to chase you down.
Yeah, I want to know. I'm all about learning new things. And
yes. And where we're kind of going with that is right now we're kind of starting local, and I love it because It's the hometown feel. I mean, this is not either of our hometowns, but This has become home, especially in recent years. And so we really want to talk to people in the area who are motivating and people that just they have a vision in life.
Yep.
And I really, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to have a vision. So that's where we're starting right now. And if we can expand, that would be great.
Well, you know what Helen Keller said, right? Well, so Helen Keller has a famous quote, and it stuck with me for a long time.
Did she say it with her hands?
I don't know how she said it, but it was her quote, and it said the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision.
Yeah, definitely.
And that stuck with me since the day I read it. I have never forgotten that quote, because you're right. like when we sat down, we were kind of already in that losing stage. We're kind of like, well, this may not go anywhere, whatever. But after sitting down and talking to Devin, it was kind of like, you know what, we're gonna go into this head first, full speed, and we're just gonna do it. And it's been one of those things. It's been rewarding.
Yeah.
Like Devin says, if you're gonna do it, start now.
Do it.
Start now.
Just do it.
Yep. And we wanted to share that with you guys, kind of like what we're about.
Yeah. And one last thing, and this is one of the more important things that we are about, is I kind of want to talk about subjects that a lot of talk radio or just a lot of like The View. I want to talk about subjects that you're not going to see on these mainstream deals.
Yep.
I want to talk about race relations. We already talked about rape culture, which is probably our most downloaded episode because I mean, rape culture, that gets people's attention. But I'm not about just getting people's attention. I'm about, because these things really do concern me, I want to talk about kind of the corners of society that we all know's there. We hear people, activists preaching about it, but yet a lot of, people in middle America just working, you don't really hear from them their opinion about it. But I know people have opinions about it because I've talked to people. Everybody has opinions about it, but it's like, why am I not hearing about it? Why am I only reading about it on comments and, in Reddit or on YouTube?
Yep.
I want to touch on these subjects.
We want to talk about subjects that people are too scared to talk about.
Well, too scared to talk about, or just too lazy to talk about, whatever. So if you listen to us, you're gonna hear some of those topics.
And some of them aren't they're not easy topics to talk about.
No, they're not.
But the thing is you got to have the confidence to know that you're gonna go in there and you're gonna talk about the subject, and you're not gonna make yourself look like an asshole.
Well, you know what? In some of these subjects, I am going to look like an asshole. I really am. Because some of these subjects I have strong opinions about.
Exactly.
And so some of these subjects I don't really care too much about people's feelings about them.
Yeah.
About my opinion on them.
And that's all it is it's an opinion, our opinion, Midwest perspective on these subjects.
Midwest, whatever, two white guys, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. But, I want to talk about a lot of tough subjects.
Yep. The stuff that we got to really bear down and kind of...
Just stuff that I've wondered why, but mostly wondered why I'm not hearing anybody talking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I have to go search on the web, get to the dark corners of the web to hear people talking about it.
Yep.
And usually when I see comments and stuff, people aren't talking civilly about it. I want to sit here in the studio and talk calmly about these very tough things that go on in our society.
And not have a heated confrontation about the situation, and be able to share like-minded ideas, or not even like-minded ideas, but share different opinions about it.
Yes.
Learn from each other.
And how we're going to get better at this is getting feedback from you guys.
Yep. We you guys know you guys can contact us at midwestmindmelt@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page. Give us a follow. We do tend to do uploads. We're going to be a little more active on there, and whatnot. We always put an announcement out every time that new episode drops. But honestly, if you guys really, especially locally right now, if you guys want to get on and talk, let us know. We have a portable setup actually.
Yep.
That we can actually come to you.
We will find you.
So don't be afraid. If you want to sit down and talk about something that you're passionate about, we're more than willing to come meet you and talk about what you want to talk about.
Yeah, just shoot us a message and we'll set something up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys are our biggest inspiration right now.
You guys are the inspiration, and you're more interesting than you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I'm not famous. I haven't really done a whole lot with my life, but I have a lot of life experience stories I can talk about. And you'd be surprised like how your story might influence somebody else. Sometimes that's all it takes. So that's gonna be it for tonight. We just want to share with you guys what our plan is and what Midwest Mind Melt is for us. Hopefully you guys feel the same way. We also want to give a big thank you to everybody that's gone out there, liked us on Facebook, commented, been active with us. That's mentioned it to your friends and your family, whoever listens to podcasts. We just want to thank you guys, like, from our hearts. It's been a huge step for us, and definitely been one of those things that we just couldn't have done it without you guys, to be honest.
Right.
I mean,
So we want to give you a big thumbs. I mean, no.
oh yeah, thumbs up. Yeah, there you go. You need to control that finger a little better.
I know. That's what she said.
But yeah, we want you guys to know that we do appreciate everything that you guys have done to help us.
Absolutely. We're nothing without you.
So, starting now, we're gonna have video podcasts. Go check us out on YouTube.
You better check us out, infidels.
Yes, subscribe, please. That'd be huge. You know, that way you can get an update. You know, click the little bell so every time that a new episode pops up, you guys can watch it. Until next week, guys. Have a good week. Stay safe. Don't do anything we wouldn't do.
And always, ribbon